Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. For 23 years, Melanie lived with her husband, Samuel, believing they shared a life of trust and complicity. 3 children, birthdays celebrated together, family vacations, everything seemed perfect to the world. But behind the smiles and the photos, a heavy secret gnawed at Samuel. Since the beginning of their marriage, he had been having an affair with another woman. Melanie knew. She had discovered the truth by chance, one evening when the masks fell. But instead of confronting Samuel, she had chosen silence. Every day, she endured it, kept up appearances, protecting her children from the truth. Her love for her family and her personal dignity had pushed her to endure the unacceptable, hoping that time and responsibility would impose respect and order. But now, 23 years later, as her youngest daughter prepares to marry, Melanie feels the weight of the lie has become too heavy. Years of betrayal, restraint, and hidden pain have not erased her courage or strength. This time, she will not remain silent. The wedding, which was supposed to be a day of joy and unity, becomes the scene of a revelation that will forever change the course of their lives and that of the entire family. Melanie stood in front of her bedroom mirror, delicately adjusting her youngest daughter, Clara's veil. The morning light filtered through the white curtains, illuminating her age-marked but dignified face. Everything seemed perfect: Clara's radiant smile, the floral arrangement, the sweet scent of the roses. Yet, Melanie felt a dull weight in the pit of her stomach. For 23 years, she had lived with her husband, Samuel, a man many envied for his success and charisma. But she knew the truth: the years of lies, silent infidelities, and broken promises. She had discovered the first betrayal early in their marriage, and each subsequent discovery had only confirmed what she feared. For her children, she had chosen silence. She had learned to smile when Samuel walked through the door, to accept his absences and his lies. But today, watching her daughter prepare to say, "I do," Melanie felt the time had come to take back control of her life. She still remembered Samuel's last lie, a few weeks earlier, when he pretended to be in a late meeting while meeting his lover at a hotel in the city. The lie could have gone unnoticed, but not to Melanie. Every detail, every forced smile from Samuel, every glance exchanged with this woman she silently hated, had pierced her heart a little more. As she escorted Clara to the ceremony room, Melanie felt a new strength within her. The years of silence and suffering had forged her patience, but also her determination. Today, she would no longer be content to simply endure. And in a corner of the room, Samuel was chatting with guests, unaware that Melanie had already made her decision. The wedding day would become the moment of truth. The reception room was bathed in light, laughter, and conversation, creating a festive atmosphere. The guests were focused on Clara, the bride, radiant in her white gown. But Melanie, behind her discreet smile, saw only the fragments of her shattered past. As she helped her daughter adjust her veil, her gaze met Samuel's. He was laughing, relaxed, talking with colleagues and friends. Melanie felt a dull anger rising within her: 23 years of infidelity, lies, broken promises, and yet this man had the audacity to appear happy and carefree. One of the guests, a longtime family friend, approached Melanie and whispered, "You know, I heard rumors." Melanie smiled politely, feeling her heart sink. These rumors had been circulating for years, but no one confirmed them. She knew the time had come to turn these whispers into the blatant truth. Meanwhile, Samuel was chatting with his lover, who had been invited to the reception under the pretext of being a family friend. Melanie saw her and felt a wave of disgust and inner strength mix. She knew she could wait no longer. Appearances were over. As the wedding party prepared for the bride's entrance, Melanie stepped back for a moment, taking a deep breath. Every step she took in this room would be a step toward the truth, toward freedom from these 23 years of lies. And as Clara walked toward the altar, Melanie felt that the crucial moment was approaching. Soon, all would be revealed. The silence of the ceremony contrasted with Melanie's inner turmoil. Each step Clara took toward the altar echoed in her mind like a countdown. She had never wanted to burden her children with her pain, but the weight of 23 years of betrayal was becoming unbearable. Samuel stood by the altar, his usual smile on his face, unaware that Melanie was watching his every move. His heart sank at the ease with which he spoke to this woman, his lover hidden among the guests. Melanie felt an icy rage mingle with sadness. After all these years, he still believed he could play with time and appearances. As she approached the buffet, Melanie pretended to smile at the guests, but her thoughts were clear. He had to be confronted, here and now, before this marriage became a complete charade. She took a deep breath and walked toward Samuel. Her voice, soft at first, became firm. "Samuel, we need to talk." The husband turned around, surprised. He smiled embarrassedly, thinking it was just a minor quarrel. "Melanie, not now, please." But she shook her head, implacable. "If not now, then when? 23 years of lies cannot continue." The guests' eyes began to turn towards them. A few murmurs arose, but Melanie continued, her voice clear and calm. "Your lies, your infidelities, they have affected this family for too long. And I can no longer ignore them." Samuel paled slightly, realizing that this time, Melanie's silence was no longer a refuge but a weapon. He tried to justify himself, but each word seemed hollow in the face of his wife's determination. Their children's eyes, a mixture of astonishment and concern, were fixed on them. Melanie knew she had crossed a line, there was no going back. The truth was about to come out, and with it, the fragile balance they had maintained for more than 2 decades. The guests' murmurings intensified, from mere whispers to hushed questions. Melanie, her gaze fixed on Samuel, sensed that the moment had come to finally break the veil of lies. She took a deep breath and spoke aloud, loud enough for everyone to hear. "For 23 years, you've been cheating on me. For 23 years, you've been hiding your true life from this family. And today, in front of our children and everyone around us, I refuse to continue pretending." A shocked silence fell over the room. The guests froze, some exchanging incredulous glances, others lowering their heads in discomfort. Samuel, his cheeks flushed, could at first only stammer, "Melanie, that's not true." But Melanie did not give in. "Don't lie. Everyone knows now. Your years of betrayal, your lies, it's all out in the open." Her children's gaze, a mixture of anger and pain, stared at their father. Clara, ready to marry, felt betrayed by the man she had always considered a role model. Tears welled up, but Melanie held them back, focused on her mission, to restore truth and dignity to her family. Samuel tried to defend himself, trying to minimize the situation. "It wasn't I." But Melanie interrupted him firmly. "Your apologies can't erase 23 years of lies. And today, you will have to face all the consequences." Some guests whispered among themselves, others murmured, "I never imagined." Or, after all this time. The festive atmosphere had transformed into a scene of confrontation where every previous smile now seemed false. For the first time in years, Melanie felt a wave of liberation. She had kept silent out of love and protection for her children, but now she saw the power of the truth. Samuel, publicly humiliated, could no longer hide. And amidst the chaos, Melanie knew this was only the beginning. The truth had been revealed, but the consequences would affect each of them, and most importantly, Samuel would now have to face the anger and disappointment of his family. The shock of the revelation spread like a ripple through the room. The guests didn't know where to look, some looked away in embarrassment, others murmured shocked comments. But the greatest storm was brewing within the family. Melanie and Samuel's children, who had been silent witnesses until then, could no longer contain their emotions. The eldest son, Ethan, clenched his fists, approached his father. "How could you, all these years? Did you never think about us? About Mom?" His voice trembled between anger and despair. Samuel, unable to respond, looked down. Guilt and fear were finally evident on his face. Clara, the bride, tried to hold back her tears, but her father's betrayal overshadowed the euphoria of the wedding. She whispered to her mother, "Mom, I didn't know. Melanie took her in her arms, hugging her daughter tightly. I know, darling. But now you know. And it's time it all came out. The other daughter, Sophie, looked at her father with a mixture of disgust and pain. You've ruined all these years, you haven't just betrayed Mom, you've betrayed us too. Samuel, now cornered, tried to speak, to justify himself, but every word seemed empty and ridiculous. The guests, unable to remain neutral, began to murmur judgments, some openly condemning him. Melanie, her face firm, felt her inner strength grow. She understood that these revelations, although painful, were necessary to save what could still be saved, the dignity of her children and her own. She finally addressed Samuel, in an icy voice. You had 23 years to be honest. Now you have no choice. You will have to face the truth and accept the consequences of your actions. Samuel bowed his head, realizing that the world he had built on lies was crumbling around him. The wedding feast, which should have been a joyous occasion, had turned into a family courtroom where betrayal and pain ruled the roost. And Melanie knew that this was only the beginning of a long road, restoring trust, rebuilding the family and, above all, finding the peace she had lost so many years ago. The days following the revelation were a whirlwind of tension and difficult decisions. The family, still in shock, now had to deal with the consequences of a long-hidden truth. The children each withdrew into their inner worlds, oscillating between anger, sadness, and disappointment. Samuel, meanwhile, suddenly found himself isolated. His colleagues and friends, some of whom had been present at the reception, had quickly learned the news. The looks that once admired his success were now filled with judgment and contempt. Invitations stopped, calls became rare, and even his business partners began to distance themselves. Melanie, despite the pain, remained the pillar of the family. She devoted her days to reassuring her children, answering their questions and their anger. She knew their trust had been betrayed, but she wanted to show them that the truth could also be an instrument of liberation. One evening, as she sat in the silent living room, Melanie received a call from Samuel. His voice, trembling and weak, betrayed his shame. Melanie. I don't know how to fix it. She looked at him calmly. There is no instant repair. Trust is rebuilt over time, but first, you must accept the consequences of your actions and understand the pain you have caused. The local media, alerted by some curious guests, began covering the story. What was supposed to be a private family wedding turned into a public scandal. Samuel, now facing public opinion, felt the weight of his double life and his choices. Melanie, for her part, decided to stay strong, to protect her children, and to show them that a lie, even one 23 years old, could be exposed with dignity and courage. Each confrontation, each difficult question, reinforced her conviction: silence was no longer an option. Clara's marriage, which should have symbolized happiness and unity, became the catalyst for a new era for this family, an era in which truth, strength, and integrity would once again become the pillars of their lives. The house was eerily quiet that morning. The shouting from the previous day seemed to have dissipated, but the unease still reigned. Melanie and Samuel's children each took refuge in their rooms, trying to come to terms with their father's betrayal. Melanie, determined to protect her children, summoned Samuel into the living room. He entered, hesitant, his face marked by shame and worry. She looked him straight in the eyes. Samuel, it's time you understood one thing: this family is not your playground. Years of lies have come at a price. And that price will have to be paid by you, not me, and not the children. Samuel opened his mouth, but Melanie continued. You destroyed trust, broke our home. Now we need actions, not words. You have to make a choice: you walk away to allow this family to rebuild, or you stay and face the anger and pain you have caused. The children, having heard the conversation from the stairs, came down one by one. Clara, her eyes red from crying, came forward. Dad. I don't know if I can forgive you. But Mom is right. You have to decide what you want to be. Samuel, cornered, felt for the first time the weight of his 23 years of lies. His hands trembled slightly, and his gaze searched for an escape that didn't exist. He understood that his family's decision was no longer up to him. They had chosen truth, integrity, and loyalty. After a long silence, Samuel murmured, I'm going to walk away. I have to think about everything I've done and figure out how to fix it, or at least try." Melanie nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. She knew this decision wouldn't erase the pain, but it was a first step toward rebuilding. In this house marked by lies and betrayal, a new balance was beginning to emerge. The family, despite the wounds, was gradually regaining its strength. And Melanie knew that, from now on, she would never again accept silence in the face of betrayal. The following weeks were a mixture of pain and rebirth. Samuel had left home, leaving behind a heavy but necessary silence. Melanie and her children were beginning to find their rhythm again, learning to live without the destructive presence of infidelity. Every morning, Melanie prepared breakfast in silence, watching her children settle around the table. Shy laughter began to bubble up again, and for the first time in years, the house seemed to breathe an air of peace. Clara, still reeling from the ruined wedding, found comfort in the arms of her mother and sister Sophie. Melanie, for her part, felt stronger than ever. The years of silence had forged her resilience, and now she could focus on what mattered, family and the truth. She knew the rebuilding would be long, but she was ready to face each step with courage. One evening, as they sat down to look at old family photos, Clara took her mother's hand. "Mom, I'm sorry you had to carry everything alone." Melanie smiled softly, hugging her daughter close. "You've never been alone, my darling. We're together now, and that's all that matters." Meanwhile, Samuel was slowly realizing the extent of his loss. His efforts to contact the family had been rebuffed or ignored. Every call, every message went unanswered. He understood that broken trust was not restored by mere words, but by sincere, long-term, and patient actions. During this period of reconstruction, Melanie and her children also discovered a new freedom. They could finally speak openly, laugh without fear, and plan for their future without the shadow of past lies. Life went on, more fragile but also more real. And Melanie knew she had just taken a crucial step, transforming pain into strength, silence into courage, and betrayal into a life lesson for her family. A few months had passed since Samuel's departure. Melanie and her children had found a more peaceful rhythm, and the house finally exuded serenity. But Samuel, consumed by regret and guilt, tentatively tried to reconnect. One evening, he knocked on the door of the house, hesitant, his face marked by worry and shame. Melanie opened it, her gaze cold and determined. "What are you doing here, Samuel?" she asked, without inviting him in. I wanted to talk," he stammered. Melanie crossed her arms. "Talk? After 23 years of lies? After destroying our family and our children's trust?" Ethan, who was behind her, stepped forward, his gaze stern. "Dad, do you really think a few words can erase everything you've done?" Clara and Sophie remained silent, but their eyes betrayed anger and disappointment. Samuel suddenly felt the weight of his actions heavier than ever. Every gesture, every smile, every past lie came back to haunt him. Melanie continued, her voice firm. "We moved on without you. We learned to live with the truth. And you must learn to live with your mistakes. You no longer have a place here, Samuel." Samuel, humiliated and overwhelmed, realized that the control he had believed he had over his family was now lost. He was faced with a simple but unrelenting truth: trust once broken could not be rebuilt with superficial apologies. As he walked away, her heart heavy, Melanie felt a strange sense of liberation. She had confronted her past, protected her children, and, most importantly, restored emotional justice within her family. That evening, she knew the reconstruction was complete. They no longer needed Samuel to move forward. Spring brought a soft, comforting light into Melanie's home. The flowers in the garden were blooming, and with them, the family was slowly regaining its serenity. The scars of the past remained visible, but they were no longer chains, they were lessons, reminders of the strength and resilience within them. Clara, now married, often came to visit with her husband. Laughter and conversation resonated throughout the house, creating a warm and authentic atmosphere. Ethan and Sophie, each in their own way, were rebuilding their relationship with their mother, feeling protected and heard. Melanie sat in the living room, looking at her children and feeling immense pride. After 23 years of silence and pain, she had chosen truth and dignity. She had confronted Samuel, exposed his lies, and guided her children through the storm. The family had survived, more united and stronger than ever. One morning, as she opened the shutters and let the sun in, Melanie smiled. She knew life could be unfair and cruel, but she had discovered that inner strength, courage, and family love could overcome any betrayal. Samuel, for his part, remained absent. He had tried to return, but he realized that he had lost his place and that the family he had betrayed no longer depended on him. Now he had to face his own choices and the consequences of his actions. For Melanie and her children, a new chapter was beginning, a chapter of truth, honesty, and unwavering love. The years of lies were now a memory, a test that had revealed their strength and unity. And as the sun bathed the house in golden light, Melanie knew that, no matter the trials they had faced, the family had found its rebirth. She had kept silent for too long, but courage and truth had finally triumphed.